Coming up on episode 97 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Kings were so close to a Summer League title, but there was some good news to take away from it. So Ben and I will break down what we saw and what we liked from the Summer League playoffs for Sacramento. And then we move on to talk football. Training camp is here, ladies and gentlemen. It's the best time of year. Ben and I talk about news going on in the Niners camp, news going on in the Eagles camp, and what we're really excited for, training camp battles, all that fun stuff. So with that being said, y'all, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet Rets. Ben, training camp is here. How are you feeling?
You said it, man. I'm good. I'm excited. I've been stoked and looking forward to this day now for a few weeks. It's nice to be able to talk about football again.
That's true. But before we do that, like you guys heard in the intro, we got to talk about basketball and address the NBA Summer League and the NBA Summer League Final, the championship, which the Kings were a part of. And, I just want to, we want to touch up on this really quick before we move on to the football. But, they got to the semifinal games against the Raptors, and the Raptors were the number one seed, best point differential, all that. And the Kings won 98-88 from a 36-point explosion from one Isaac Jones, which was a sight to see. It was really good. And we ended up in the championship game with the Charlotte Hornets. And unfortunately, it did not go our way. It was a close game. I mean, we were trailing for most of the game and kind of struggling a little bit, trying to chip away at the deficit, but we had a chance at the end, but we ended up not pulling it out. 83-78 loss. Charlotte's first ever championship title of any kind in its history, so good for them. Con Knipple can, celebrate that, and, that's all good for them. But what did you think about, these playoffs, the Summer League playoffs, anything that you can take away from our guys in those two games?
For all these young guys in general, it's great experience because, in general, to be on any championship stage, it's exciting, right? Even like in a rec league, when you're at the championship game, you're stoked about it because the championship is a championship and you work all season long to get to that point. And obviously it's going to be the most important game you play at the very least that season. But for a lot of these guys, it could be for their entire careers. Looking at around that room, at a guy like Jones, Mason Jones, who's been there before. He's won these titles with the Sac Kings G League team. Like that's it was fun to watch these guys kind of go through that exposure at the championship level, but seeing especially our boys Nique Clifford and Isaac Jones get their recognition at the all summer league teams 1 and 2 was really, it was nice to see because, all off season we've been hearing how the Kings are the worst franchise in the league. They're the most poorly run. They make poor decision after poor decision. Well, two guys that they drafted, Isaac Jones, a year or two ago, and now with most recent in Nique Clifford, these two guys are panning out. And that to me was the biggest takeaway, the exposure to the game, but those two guys just being a constant force throughout all of Summer League, all 6 of those games was something that you can absolutely build on.
Absolutely, yeah. Nique Clifford, first team All Summer League. Isaac Jones, second team All Summer League. And again, big performances from specifically Isaac in the last 2 games in the playoff setting. I thought that was really encouraging because whenever the Kings needed something, because the Raptors, they played good defense. They were playing really good perimeter defense on us. And, when we needed to get a bucket, it was Isaac Jones. And Isaac Jones was posting up. He was able to get down low, get to his spot. No one could push him off of his spot. He really dominated physically with his physicality in that game. And I thought it was really cool to see, not to mention he's been incorporating that corner 3. And even if he's making 1 or 2 a game, that is enough to space out the defense enough and get you time on the floor. And all the things, he's good at just being around the ball. And I think that's something that the Kings desperately need. Someone who's as strong as he is and athletic as he is and can really, just has a nose for being in the right place at the right time. So I was definitely impressed with Isaac in both of these games. I mean, he was incredibly efficient given the stakes. And I mean, the reffing was awful. And it wasn't just for, against the Kings. The Kings definitely got some favorable calls in these games too. But, Isaac Jones, you could tell, was dealing with this physicality and not getting calls and still being able to, throw the ball up against three dudes and still make the bucket
Yeah.
and show nice touch. So I was really, those are things that you're like, okay, you can definitely see him getting some rotation minutes on the bench, play against bench players, and you can see the path with him. So that was definitely a big step up. And so those two, Nique Clifford and Isaac Jones did a really good job. But how do you feel now coming? I know it's summer league, so it's we don't want to overreact to anything. But we talked about this last week about, will these young guys find some time in the rotation with all
Mm-hmm.
these vets that we have, right? Do you feel more or less confident now that the guys, we had mentioned, let's say the four guys, right? Devin Carter, Maxime Reynaud, Isaac Jones, and Nique Clifford. How confident are you that at least two or maybe all of these guys find actual legitimate minutes?
I think all of them will find minutes. As far as legitimate minutes, I can guarantee you that Isaac Jones is going to find himself more minutes this year than he did last year. I think the growth that we saw over the summer, I mean, just going back actually to last year, the growth that we saw from him, and then going into this summer in the summer league, there's a lot of growth, not just with him as a player, but you also see him using his body, his weight, his size a little bit more. And that's something you got to do at the NBA level. And I think he's absolutely, now looking at the roster, looking around the room in the locker room, it's you're lacking some forward depth, and I think because of that, you're going to have to rely on some of these younger guys. And honestly, Isaac has proven to this point that he's absolutely deserved to be given a shot at some legitimate rotational minutes. As far as like the other three guys, I think you're most likely to see more minutes out of Devin Carter right now than you would out of, say, like Maxime Reynaud or Nique Clifford. I think if I were to kind of guess how it was going to go, I would say Devin Carter gets, the second most minutes out of the four guys. I think Isaac gets the first. And then I say Nique Clifford and then Maxime. The only reason I say Nique Clifford is because, there's an overwhelming amount of guards on the team. But at the same time, like, it kind of just, like we kind of talked about a week or two ago, Doug Christie is going to play all these guys and give all these guys a shot. Depending on how they look early on and depending on, what the team looks like, what the rotation feels like, some of these guys may earn more minutes over the others, even though they didn't look like they should deserve them in the summer league or not, So as it gets into it, we'll see. I think if I had to guess, I think Devin Carter and Isaac Jones have absolutely proven they're capable of heavier rotational minutes. And I think the two rookies are on their way, but they have, a lot to learn. And that's not to say that Isaac and Devin don't, but they're a little more polished right now.
Right. The NBA experience will definitely help, and they both play meaningful minutes against, in meaningful games last year. So I do think that, when you're asking who's going to contribute right away, I think it would make sense to have the two second year guys who definitely showed improvement and development. So I think this is going to be an opportunity for both of them, given the positions that they're in too, right? Like we need the backup point guard spot. Devin's going to be sharing time with Malik and Dennis in that role. And then you have, Keegan Murray as your only true forward on this team. And that's even kind of stretching it because you can call him a 3-2 if you wanted.
Yep.
And to say that if he goes down, then it's like, who's next? And Isaac Jones really, that would kind of be his spot for the taking, especially since we haven't re-signed Trey and things like that. So it makes sense. And I would probably agree with you that that's how it's going to be to start the season. And obviously if the rookies make an impact, then, we'll see what the playing time looks like there. And obviously, who knows, maybe this year it's going to be spot minutes for these guys while the, vets play out their minutes and play out their time here until this team kind of gets a little bit rebalanced. But until that time, I think Summer League was going to be the best shot to get these guys, serious minutes, 25, 30 plus minutes a night, and for them to really get their feet wet. And I was impressed with the guys that we had because we were nervous going into it of how much of an impact could we really expect out of these guys. And I thought there was far more polish and maturity in their games Otherwise, if it wasn't the case, they wouldn't have been in the summer league final. They played together as a team. Their defense was really, really good. We were a little small at times, so we definitely got we're definitely struggling on the boards. That was one of our Achilles heels during this time, but we were doing very well guarding on the perimeter and making things tough for the teams we were playing against. So that kind of energy, that kind of culture, if they're doing that in the summer league team and expect that out of their, regular ball club, that's the kind of energy I want. And it was good seeing Doug there a lot. You're seeing Scott there and Vivek pulled up. Not that I wanted to see
Yeah.
him. I knew as soon as he was there, I was like, well, this game just got way less fun and we're probably going to
Bro,
struggle. And it's not.
he had to show off the new haircut. I mean, he can't just stay inside with that thing. Come on
That was
now.
so bad, bro. Yeah, that's bad. He's entering his dang. I don't know what's a comparable villain to put in there, but he doesn't look good haircut, brother. Good haircut. Whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, when I saw Vivek, it was good that the culture, they're trying to instill this culture. Maybe the conversation is Vivek is always the one, stepping on his own feet and ruining the culture. Whether he knows he's doing it or not. But I think that Scott really took the reins and just said, hey, we're going to, if you don't play hard for us, we'll find someone who does. And I think those guys really took it seriously. And I was happy that we played our guys all the way through the summer league versus just shutting them down. Because even if they do get minutes, I don't care. I want them to get used to the idea of a more established role and to get some shots up now and get used to it. So I was really happy with what I saw from summer league.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is like as much as a third title would have been a lot of fun and we would have, set the record for the most summer league championships out of any NBA team ever. The biggest part of this all is the experience that all these guys got. And I really can't like stress that enough. And I've talked to some Kings fans throughout the week here who, they're dogging on Isaac and I forget the dude's name who was awesome all game long, but it just bounced off his foot at the end of the game.
Plowden? Yeah,
Yeah,
Plowden.
Plowden.
Yeah,
And he was
yeah.
awesome. Like the whole game, he was like really solid. He was like making plays. He had an incredible putback jam that gave me Derek Jones energy. But like, biggest moment of the game, he goes down. He stays in the same position on the ground for what felt like an eternity. The ball just rolls off his foot. Like it was such a Kang's ending. But I was saying, like the best part about all this is the experience that they got. They got the most experience. They got all 6 games. You got the championship level experience. Like you got the, biggest energy, highest stakes game that you can play in summer league. And that's experience right there that it's tough to come by, especially as a brand new rookie who's just drafted, mere weeks ago. So exciting time for these guys. And, definitely something you should be holding your head high about.
Absolutely. And this is, again, the summer league is a good format for them for the early season and the in-season tournament. They get that kind of level of what to expect early on when they run into those kind of games in the season. That'll be exciting to see if they get any minutes during those games. But no, overall, good summer league, good summer, in terms of the young talent that we have on the roster. In terms of the moves overall in general, that can be discussed on whether or not that's truly good. Let me, before last thing on the Kings, because it's been talked about a little bit. We've just been praising these young guys, but there's a few veterans that the Kings have apparently been linked to, and I just want your take on the names. Obviously, Russell Westbrook still being thrown out there as a name that's connected for some reason, and another one, Ben Simmons. So, how do you feel? Do you do any? Ben Simmons, Russ. Do you think that addition would benefit this team at all?
I think either one of those, and I might be in the minority when I say it, I think either one of those signings would be beneficial to the Sacramento Kings because, from one stance, from Russell Westbrook, he brings in himself a culture. He brings in energy and something that you want to have around your locker room. For Ben Simmons, he brings you a point guard and a power forward. So from that standpoint, it's something that the Kings kind of do need. Obviously he gets the ball anywhere outside of like 22 feet and, he's like a little chicken and he wants to pass the ball. So that part of it isn't too exciting, right? But, the same skill level can almost be said with Russell Westbrook, but he's just, not as afraid to shoot the basketball. It's just whether it goes in or not is the biggest question. But either one of those could benefit the Kings in one way or the other. Now, something to note on that is with the latest signing that the Kings had in Doug McDermott, which I actually like that, and I hope that we use him. with that latest signing, that gives us 15 roster spots completely filled. So if we were to go out and get one last free agent, it would have to be, we'd have to waive somebody. And the most likely waive at that point would be Terrence Davis, whose contract through this year is non-guaranteed. So that would, be kind of an early indication, I think, is if you see, excuse me, if you see Terrence Davis's contract being waived, him being waived, or anything, any movement around that, then it's likely that the next move or the next steps is bringing in somebody else. So we'll kind of gauge that off of that.
That's fair. And I agree. I think, with Ben and Russ, we both, the league already knows, these players are kind of what they are at this stage. Simmons has never really been the same player since he failed to take a layup in a playoff game. And I think ever since then, it just hasn't been the same. And I think, I was really excited about Simmons when he came out in the draft. I was super hyped for him.
Yeah.
He
was the next LeBron at the time,
yeah,
bro.
big believer. 17-year-old me was like, oh, this guy, he's something special. But yeah, no, once I, fears in, I just think Simmons now, if we're going to add a non-shooter to this roster, and that's the same thing with Russ, we have the shooters, to make it work. But I still think there's only so few lineups we can put, those guys in without, if we're going to try and put Domas and one of those guys at the same time, it's just going to make it a little tougher, especially because not that Domas can't shoot. He's proven he can, but he just doesn't like to. So it's like, unless Domas is popping 5 threes a game, it's hard for me to, picture one of those guys being added into the fold.
Yeah, and that would be the weird part, and probably something that takes almost an entire season to adjust to, especially with a young coach in Doug Christie, is you're essentially going to be running 2 separate game plans, from what your starters can do versus what your bench can do. And that's tough, when you can't really stick to a single game plan all the way through, and you got to kind of switch up what kind of plays you go to from this time versus the other. Like, that gets a little hairy with younger coaches. And I say younger, obviously Doug is in his ages, right? But he's not old. I'm not calling him old, but he's inexperienced in the head coaching role, and that's the part of it that I question when you have these guys who don't shoot versus guys who do shoot. In the starters, like it'll be all over the place.
Yeah, so we will see, how Doug decides to mix things up, or if the Kings make any more additions or moves in this offseason. But if it is what it is, then it's time to go along for the ride and, hope for the best. So with that being said, we're going to move on now to talk some football. So we will be right back. All right, we are back, and we are going to start off by talking some San Francisco 49ers. So again, training camp. We're back. Football is officially back, baby. Day one's the best. Now, with all these storylines, going into this, OTAs, leftovers from OTAs, now we get to see, the draft picks coming along and real practice. This is going to be it. So a lot of fun. The vibes are okay. Well, we're talking about the Niners, so I don't want to say the vibes are immaculate right now, and I'm gonna let you break that down, because in just a few weeks the vibe has changed a little bit. But we're gonna talk about both the Eagles and the Niners, obviously, but kind of how we're gonna do this is we're gonna talk about any news that we've had over the past couple weeks, updates on any contract situations, things of that nature, and we're also going to discuss training camp battles and the spots that we believe our team we need to pay attention to the most, or you guys should pay attention to the most. So let's start with the Niners. Ben, interesting day one and interesting, past couple weeks for you guys. So what's good in San Francisco? What are you looking out for?
So, vibes all off season were pretty good up till up till about a week ago. And obviously you take care of your quarterback contract, you take care of your tight end, you take care of your star linebacker, like all feels good in the world. And then a wide receiver looks around the room and says, "Hey, this is a great time for me to ask for a new contract or a trade." And I say or a trade, it really is just a new contract. He wants to be a 49er. The 49ers want him here. The leverage portion is saying that or a trade, right? So that happened last Monday, and we talked about that last week, right? But this made a lot of questions and drew a lot of questions going into training camp here and the preparation for it as to what day one would look like when the veterans report, right? Because we think back to last year, Marcos, when we had this discussion on our dearly beloved Brandon Ayuk, who we talked about too many damn times on this podcast last year, and what that hold-in was like. And we talked about how toxic that felt, how, vibes were down. It felt like a cloud. And then you hear it from the players as well. Like there was just a cloud over it all training camp long. It wasn't ideal. And so when you have a situation like this with Jauan Jennings, you get this PTSD kind of feeling where it's like, no, we don't need to be going through this again. And so you're thinking in your head as a Niners fan, like, there's no way in hell the Niners would let, this get into training camp without having a contract, resolved, right? Well, instead of getting a contract, they ended up working out 6 receivers. And yeah, so they signed and I'm really bad with his name and I didn't write it down, but I think it was St. Brown's brother. So it was
Equanimous, I think.
Equanimous, that's it. Thank you. Yeah. Equanimous St. Brown, who is the older brother to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that was, it was interesting because you texted me when initially got reported and you were like, the Niners signed St. Brown. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I look at it and I'm just cringing, bro. But Equanimous he's a decent receiver. I don't think this is a bad signing by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think it's probably one of those more practice squad style signings where it's like you're going to have him for training camp. You're going to see what he's capable of, and odds are he's going to start the season off on the practice squad. Mm-hmm. We'll see. It obviously depends on what the wide receiver room looks like for the 49ers, and right now it's not pretty. But aside from all that, Jauan Jennings does not have a contract. However, Marcos, day 1 of training camp started today. And who was in attendance, and not just in attendance and walking around in a jumpsuit? No, he was out there practicing, Jauan Jennings, and he was actually out there leading the wide receivers in their reps and going through a lot of that practice. So I loved to see that. I want to start this off on a little bit of a high note now by saying, like, that is who Jauan Jennings is. And that's 100% why, like, last week, I'm like, this is a guy you lock down in your organization because he shows up for everything. He's there for every play. He's always giving his all. Like, he is what it means to be a 49er. And because he's showing up to practice or to training camp right now and not doing a hold in or hold out, gives me all the more confidence the 49ers would be signing him soon. Like, that to me should be like the biggest sign. So, as I go down this, I want to get your thoughts on just kind of what you saw from that and if it meant anything seeing, Jauan Jennings out there.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that him being there and being the good soldier and, just going around business as usual, I think is a good sign that the player is probably confident that something is in the works and what he is asking for is probably happening behind the scenes. Especially when you compare it to some of the interesting ones around the league, like the Micah Parsons, the Trey Hendricksons, who have been very public, very nasty. And, both owners of those teams are definitely not on their side, which is crazy. So, to have the Niners, they asked them about it and, they've been very open and honest with this process with Jauan. And I think that's been good. I think the Niners have they've kind of figured it out a little bit, how to handle these situations a little bit better. So I think that, it's talked about that Jauan was, he made it, it sounds like a big deal, but it's just, taking advantage of an opportunity. And it looks like it's going to work out, which is great. It's a win-win. Like you said, because, there's some issues that are happening right now in the wide receiver room that, you can't control. So it's just one of those things that having Jennings there is going to be huge. So yeah, big news. That's good. It's good to have him there. That's, again, great leader. That's stuff that you need to do, even if you're not the best player on the team. That's a heart and soul kind of thing to do. And that's what you need. That's what you need in every team.
Exactly. And like George Kittle talked about it too today after training camp. He just said it was, they asked him about the Jauan thing and he said, Jauan has been himself today. He's been high energy. You haven't gotten any idea that he's, going through any sort of a contract, anything right now. Like, he is just himself out there. And that to me just speaks to his character. That's one of the reasons, like, Jauan Jennings is one of my favorite players on this roster. But that'll lead me into my day ones here before we get into some of my position battles that I'm looking for. So day 1, in training camp was interesting. And Kyle Shanahan kind of started things off by addressing an injury, which, Marcos, I got to say, this is one of my keys. This is actually my only key to training camp that I'll talk about here later. And I have a little bit of stats to throw at you so I can make you kind of open your eyes and see what we've been dealing with here.
Can't wait.
But yeah, Jacob Cowing, before even going through any real exercises, they were doing some ghost routes and going through just some pre warm up stuff. He ended up at what it's believed is pulling his hamstring. So it's kind of unknown when he's going to be back and what the severity of that injury is. Obviously, we'll kind of know more as it comes out here, but it kind of sucks because this is going to kind of lead me into one of my other position battles. I was really looking at him to make a statement during training camp, and I was hoping he would kind of step up into a larger role here. But with this early injury woes, it's tough, man. But so that's how it kind of started off here. But then the rest of day one, vibes were high. D Winters, who's one of the linebackers, who's obviously fighting for a position, ended up picking off Purdy. So Purdy's already throwing interceptions. He's in midseason form. Kicker battle is heating up. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes here.
That's what I'm really here for.
Yeah, of course. Everybody is, right? Two rookies looking like they're impact players after day one, dude. Running back Jordan James and wide receiver Jordan Watkins have been those guys to start right now. So a little bit of surprising, some surprises right there. But all in all, vibes were up. Nick Bosa was out there. He was kind of doing his own thing, but he also had some reps with Michael Williams. No 11 on 11s or anything like that for him. But Michael Williams looked great. Alfred Collins was out there just being his big self and making a statement, just, seeing a body that big. It was much so a presence that I think people were a little, taken back by, because you don't typically see a guy of that size, especially walking around the Niners facility. So seeing the defensive line put in work today was the biggest thing that kind of turned a lot of heads and drew some attention. So that was really fun to see. Ultimately, Jauan Jennings is looking like wide receiver one right now. He was putting in work. He had 4 catches and he drew 1 penalty on a downfield pass, I believe. I don't know the yardage, but he was looking like wide receiver one Jauan Jennings. And that to me speaks even more why you should pay him, but it also speaks to kind of the impact that I expect him to have early on in this season.
Yeah, and again, for Jennings, if he gets paid the range that he was asking for, the 15 to 17 mil, and he's going to be your number one guy, that's a great deal to have. And again, sucks for Jacob Cowing. That was disappointing to see, because again, I know for Niners fans, he was, he's your second year guy. You're hoping for a breakout year. He had the year in Shanahan's system, got a chance to figure things out. And, a hamstring, he's, it's probably training camp. He's probably missing most of training camp, and maybe they are careful with him and sit him out in the preseason games too. But those are reps that you lose, and if you're going to lose him to the rookie, it's going to be it'll be interesting to see. But I feel bad for the injury aspect of it, because it never seems to end with you guys. But we'll talk about that in a second. But on the defensive side, I did see tons of videos with Bosa, Williams, Bryce Huff too. It was good to see. It's good to see Bryce Huff in an environment with a team that actually wants him. So I think that's good for him. But I think, and again, with Collins, it was, seeing Collins just reminded me of, having rookie Jordan Davis over here, and just the way people were talking about him and his size compared to all these other guys.
Great call.
And it's definitely you can see it. He has a presence to himself. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys look. But yeah, definitely interesting news so far in training camp.
Yeah, 100%. So that was day one, kind of the immediate takeaways. Now, let's talk about these position battles, Marcos. And this is kind of in order in a lot of ways.
Okay.
But I'll kind of also say the most important one is the one I want to talk about first.
Okay.
And then the other two can kind of interchange. The second one is interesting because it's fun and it's something you and I will enjoy talking about. But number one position battle I'm looking at is the weak side linebacker. Obviously in 2023, Greenlaw held it down. In 2024, well, in the Super Bowl in 23, he tears his Achilles. He's out pretty much all of 2024. And it was Devondre Campbell Soup, who, until he cried his ass off the field, was the replacement for Dre Greenlaw. Obviously, we all know how that ended. See you later. 2025, the Niners draft Nick Martin, drawing early signs of, taking the starting role. However, in spring practices, it was D Winters who stood out more than anyone at that position. So to me right now, considering that's one of the biggest holes you've got to fill in a lot of this mass exodus, right? This is kind of the biggest watch, in my opinion. By taking Nick Martin when the Niners did, it shows they see something in Nick that other teams may not have. I want to see his strengths, if they can be heightened and if his weaknesses can be managed or hidden in kind of this early rookie season. But I'm excited to see, the battle for this weak side linebacker position, because there's some interesting names that I think, can absolutely make an impact for the 49ers, but who's actually going to step up and be able to fill shoes as big as what Dre Greenlaw provided for the team. And obviously Greenlaw was somebody the Niners ultimately didn't want to let go of. It all the way up until he signed with Denver, they were still making a phone call trying to get him back. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously it wasn't a player that they wanted to let go of, but they failed to get a deal done with Greenlaw, and ultimately he walked. So this is a big hole to fill. This is the first and biggest position battle, in my opinion, that the 49ers have right now.
No, I agree. And it'll be interesting to see, D Winters, he had some good moments last year, but he was dealing with injuries as well, correct? That was what's going on with him. So, Nick Martin, having him and D, I think that's going to be a good, battle to have. And let me ask you, if you had your preference, would you rather have D or would you rather have Nick, or does it really not matter to you? You just want the guy who can stay healthy and compete?
It's that. I want the guy who can stay healthy and compete. I think both of them have characteristics and abilities to be really solid linebackers at that position. I think that, both of them also have some weaknesses that they need to work through. And Shanahan made, he was asked a question by Grant Cohn that, was along the lines of essentially, if you could play all the rookies versus, is playing all the rookies going to be something you do this year? And Kyle Shanahan, I love how much he hates Grant. It's so funny to me. But he answers him in a super, talking down way. But he made a good point. He's like, is there a better veteran, behind one of those rookies? Because we're always going to put the best player in that position on the field. And that to me is kind of the question right now, is who's better, D Winters or Nick Martin? And I think if I had to choose one, it sounds like it's D Winters. He's been a part of the team now for 2 years. He understands, a lot of the schematics that they go for. He understands, what his responsibility would be as that weak side linebacker. And he's also, played with Fred Warner reps, not only in training camp and practices, but he's had some reps out on the field with Fred. So that to me right now would give him the advantage.
No, that makes sense. And I would feel the same way if I'm, Shanahan and co. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, Nick Martin looks exciting, but unless he's completely outplaying D, then, there's not, I wouldn't see a world where Nick gets the nod right away. I think, he'll get to prove it in preseason and things like that. But that'll be interesting. That's good. That is definitely probably the biggest question on your defense. And it has been, we saw last year what it was like without an effective partner to Fred Warner. So that's definitely going to be a good battle.
Yes, sir. So moving on to the second position battle, Marcos, we've got a battle at the kicker position.
Yes, let's go.
So obviously we all know the Niners, 2 years ago, took Jake Moody in the third round, which was already questionable. And in 2023, he was awesome. He had a really great year. Was one of the better kickers. He obviously had bigger shoes to fill in Robbie Gould's departure that year. So you kind of questioned, would he be able to do it as a rookie? Yes, he did a great job. 2024, no, he was terrible. He was, I think, 24 for 34 on the season. And obviously, because of that, the 49ers start questioning if he's the right guy for the job. And so who do they bring in this offseason? None other than the seasoned vet in Greg Joseph, he's been all over the place and he's kicked for a whole bunch of teams, but he's also proven to be pretty reliable. So what's interesting about this battle is it's not just at this point between the two kickers in Jake Moody and Greg. It's kind of rubbing off on the team. And Nick Bosa kind of actually talked about it today. He was asked about the battle, and I'm pulling up exactly what he said. He was asked so he's asked about the battle, and he says it's kind of exciting. I actually am paying attention to it. I can't lie. And
it's insane.
Whether it's the right thing to say, the wrong thing, like, it doesn't matter. What's interesting about it is everybody knows this is an issue. The issue is Jake Moody and his reliability. Can you rely on Jake Moody to pull you through in the biggest moments? There were lots of times last season where the Niners could have won games if they knocked down their field goals and extra points, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tons of times. Same could be said if they got a stop here or there. Same could be said if they didn't throw an interception. Like, we could do the if, ands, or buts all day long. Regardless, if Jake Moody hits that extra point in the Super Bowl or the field goal in the Super Bowl, we probably have, the sixth ring right now. So reliability is the biggest question. And it's been something that, Deebo Samuel had an issue with last year when he started that jawing competition or jawing match during the game, and ended up, pushing Jabril Peppers. Like, it was a whole thing, right? This is something that the organization realizes. This is something that obviously the players realize. So the battle right now is as heated as it could probably ever get. And after one day, or at least halfway through the day, I get this notification. And this is on X. This is by 49ers and NFL News 24/7. And this is 49ers kickers news. Greg Joseph goes 4 for 4. 1 from 50-yard field goal made. Jake Moody, 4 for 4, 1 50-yard field goal made. So we've got an early tie after day one in training camp. So obviously, both of these guys want the position. Both of these guys, are not guaranteed the position. I think if you had to give an upper hand at the moment, you probably still take Jake Moody. Why? Because you took him in the third round.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty tough to move on from a third round pick that quickly, especially when it's a pretty stupid pick in the first place, right? So to me, I don't think Jake's going to get replaced this season. And what I do think is I think this is healthy for his mental. The biggest thing that's, the question for Jake Moody is whether he has the mental capacity, or not the mental capacity, but rather the confidence to get back to the high level of kicking that he can be at. And, obviously we saw that in 2023. 2024, his confidence took a huge hit. I think in a lot of ways, bringing in a solid veteran like Greg and beating him out for the job, whether fully deserved or not, saying that you beat out a veteran for a job is something that boosts your confidence. And I think that's something the 49ers are aiming to do with Jake Moody. You don't want to move on from Jake Moody. I don't want to move on from Jake Moody. As much as, like, he misses a field goal and I'm like, get rid of him. Like, I don't want this guy. No, I don't want to move on from a third round pick that quickly. And that's really what it boils down to. It's not necessarily I don't want to move on from Jake. I don't want to move on from a third round pick that quickly. I'm not ready to do it if you waste your third round pick on it. So to me, this is a fun battle to kind of keep up on. I'm going to be watching it closely because I'm excited for it. But I'm really looking at Jake Moody to get back to that confident level that I know he can be at. He's a really solid kicker. He showed awesome signs. He set a Super Bowl record in the Super Bowl for the longest kick before it was very shortly after beaten. But he can be that guy for the 49ers. It really just is a confidence thing.
Yeah, and I think, I heard, if I remember correctly, he was also partially playing through some injuries too.
The ankle injury,
yeah, the ankle injury. So, that mixed with, lack of confidence, things like that, all the pressure and the season going the way it was, all the injuries, like it was a small part of a much larger issue, but it was an important part. And I think that, I think the one thing that struck a chord with me is the fact that, Nick Bosa, your defensive star, is bringing light to this. And I do think, it's not like, the beat reporters are going to say, oh, we got the kicker battle going, right? But I think it is interesting that the players are involved. And I wonder that if they're also just kind of going to Jake and say, hey, like, now's your time to earn it, bro. Like, we were behind you, that
Exactly.
kind of thing. Like, I wonder if they've had those conversations in private with him. But yeah, it's hard to give up on not even just a third round pick. He's a third round pick with no value because you literally can't trade him. Who's going to trade for a kicker? So it's just, you can let him go. Like you're basically, it's a waste of a pick if you don't use him. So it's like you definitely don't want to just move on from him. And I do think a little friendly competition is going to shake him out of the rut. And not to mention, he's talking to Greg Joseph. He's a vet. Like if he also has, he probably is going to be getting pointers and tips and things like that too.
Yeah.
That could potentially help him shake out of this rut from a veteran who's been to so many different places. So I do think, that part is important. But yeah, it's an interesting battle. It's tough that, that's one of the, positions that you have to deal with. It's one of those things you wish you had a little bit more lockdown. And who knows, maybe Jake fixes all of that this year, but that until he kind of gets consistent, that's something that you guys have to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I mean, reality is, bro, this shouldn't be on my position battle list, right? Like you don't want to have a kicker battle. At that point, you have a problem that you need to address. But the biggest thing, like, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, field goal or kickers in general have one of the hardest jobs because you really do have one job in a lot of ways. And if you don't do it at an extremely high level, you're hated. If you do it at a good level, nobody really talks about you. If
Yep.
you do it at an elite level, you're one of like three guys, and yeah, you'll get the nod for sure, but it's tough to get up to that point. So, like, even if you do your job just good enough, you do exactly what you're asked to do, and you show up more often than not, you're not going to get talked about. You're not really going to get praised. Like, you're still going to praise the quarterback for getting you in a position to put 3 points on the board, right? Or putting 6 points on the board and you just got to cap off the last one. Like, you're just not going to get that credit. But the second you start missing, people are going to let you have it. Your ear's going to get chewed off and your confidence just continues to go down and down. So that to me is like, that's why I would consider it one of the toughest mental positions to hold in football, because it's like, how do you, unless you're really good at
Mm-hmm.
completely shaking off all the noise, not stadium noise, I'm talking about like social media, reporting, all that noise, everything. If you're really good at that, you probably have no problem. But if you're not good at that, that's where it's tough. And for a young guy like Jake Moody, who he really hasn't struggled up to this point in his young career, this is a massive learning moment for him. And he talked about that last year. It's just it's a lot of confidence shaker. It's a lot of just going through his young career and going through the ups and downs. And this is something he's got to battle through. And like you said, hopefully being around a vet, whether it's a competition or not, maybe it just kind of, steel sharpens steel kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it just makes him a little more sharper, gets his confidence back up, and he gets some pointers out of it. So that's my second battle. My third battle, and I'm going to keep it light because everybody knows this is a battle, is the wide receiver room. And I'm not talking about one position, I'm talking about the entire room. Right now it is wide open and it's not pretty. It's actually probably one of the worst wide receiver rooms right now to look at in the NFL. Just ahead of training camp, the 49ers, like I said, worked out 6 wide receivers. With Jauan Jennings' current future with the 49ers a little unknown. Ricky Pearsall starting training camp on the physically unable to play list, as well as Brandon Ayuk. However, John Lynch did say that Ricky Pearsall is likely to be activated in the next few days, pending if everything goes correctly, which would be huge because then you can at least rely on him being there. But what sucks, bro, is when I was creating this battle list, my biggest guy that I was going to be looking at was Jacob Cowing. I was going to be excited, and looking at him to utilize, this moment more than anybody. He wants to prove that he has what it takes to be a competent receiver in the NFL. He's shown flashes in practices and a few times in games even. Like, now is the time for him to show what he's got and really earn himself a true roster spot. But with this hamstring injury, now it's even, questioning the guys that we even have in the wide receiver room. So it's messy right now, bro. This wide receiver battle is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of who the names are that pop up. Obviously, Jordan Watkins, aside from Jauan Jennings, was a name to look out for in day one. He was having a really solid day. So that's going to be something to me that I'm going to be paying close attention to, is who of these wide receivers right now is looking at everything that's going on and saying, this is my time to shine. Like this, if I was out there as a wide receiver and I saw everything that was going on, I would be like, yeah, I'm absolutely going to work as hard as I possibly can, because if I show out and I play as good as I can based on the injury luck that this team has had, I'm likely to get a roster spot just out of fear of not having enough depth at that position. So the wide receiver battle is my last one to really look at. And unfortunately right now, man, that room is gross.
Yeah, and again, through no fault of your own, through no fault of their own, injuries are just so impossible to control, and it's so frustrating. It's like it takes away all the hope, you think is there, and then not to mention once they get back, it's always going to be a lingering thought. So it's like, yeah, you like this wide receiver room once Brandon Ayuk comes back, but how long is it going to take for BA to get back to his full self? And then same with Ricky. Like these guys are just missing reps, and that doesn't help anything for the offense. And so I had, because of the injury, I had this question, does the lack of receiver depth right now, does that kind of change your perspective on kind of how the season might go, especially until your roster kind of gets healthy? Just because there may be a little, there's no consistency.
1000%. I mean, it's at this point now you're looking at the running back room and saying, how much can you guys carry? Because you might have to do a lot of it this year. Look, wide receivers have always been a huge part of Kyle Shanahan's system, whether they've gotten the yardage or not. They're always out there to block. And that's something that, wide receivers have taken pride in Kyle Shanahan's system. And that's something that's massively important in that system as well. And having, a lack not just of depth, but a lack of guys who know that system as well as they need to, and understand blocking as vital as it is, you got a question at that point, how effective is this scheme going to be if you run it back using the same tactics, but you plug in guys who may not take pride in blocking the same way, may not be able to physically block in the same way. Obviously, a couple of these guys are their builds are lesser than that of what we've had in the past. So it's tough. I am definitely looking around at that situation and saying, when I thought the Niners were going to win 17 games, 3 weeks ago, now I'm like, they're probably only going to win 15. So
fair enough. No, I mean, and that will be something to monitor, and, hopefully good news on Ricky. But the problem is, like, the Niners have said things that have been completely the opposite of what's been going on. So, putting Pearsall on the pup list, I thought was one of them, but I guess, it was just for practice sake, and, he'll be eligible to come off that soon. It's not the official one like BA where he's guaranteed to be gone for the first 4 weeks. So that was good news. I thought it was going to be a lot worse, and that would have made the conversation even more worse. But there's a chance you're going to have Ricky week 1. So if that's the case, that's at least, not the worst thing ever. At least you'll have some receivers, to throw the ball to.
Yeah, and I mean, putting Ricky on that list was really so that, obviously you knew he wasn't going to be able to practice till a certain point. So you put him on that list so that you can sign one more guy, whether it's at that position or wherever, right? And you can, get eyes on one more guy. So it makes sense from that standpoint. Obviously, they're going to, let somebody walk, and they'll bring him off the pup list when it matters and when it's time to do so. But the Niners have been they're very close to their information, and they don't let a lot out per se. I feel like this offseason has been a little bit different with how they've handled a lot of these press conferences and answering these questions. Kyle Shanahan is somebody who is never going to necessarily give you like the most straight up answer, and while it's frustrating, I also love that about him. Because he keeps his cards close to him. And that was kind of the phrase I was looking for a minute ago. He plays his cards. keeps them close to him and he plays them very carefully. And I think we've seen that continuously throughout Kyle Shanahan's tenure with the Niners. We saw it when he was offensive coordinator for the Falcons. Like it's just who Kyle is. It's something you got to deal with. But I think they're playing this offseason as well as you can up to this point. I'm going to move on here to my final key for training camp in its entirety. And bro, it was injuries, but we already freaking failed. So who actually cares? No. Injury was the biggest thing, bro. I'm going to throw this at you. You're going to be shocked because I don't know if you know this.
Let's see this.
So there's two parts to this. The first part is the Niners have been a top 5 most injured team in the last 5 years.
Okay. I believe
you're
that.
Like, yeah, in your head, you're like, all right, that's not too bad, right? Here's where it's crazy. Let's go back real quick to 2018. Let's start in 2018. They were the 4th most injured team. Wow, okay. 2019, they were the 6th most injured team. They went to the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah.
Okay. 2020, they were the number 1 most injured team. Oh, we remember that year. 2021, they were the 3rd most injured team. 2022, they were the 9th most injured team. 2023, last Super Bowl, 29th most injured team. So exceptional jump, right? Much better. 2024, can you take a guess, Marcos?
2nd.
After how much we talked about injuries?
You first?
Yes.
We're the first? Ah, dang. I don't know if there was one team.
Dude, and this has been kind of, this is why, like, when we have these conversations on air, off air, we talk about, like, these injuries, like, as much as I don't like to use it as an excuse and I try to avoid doing it, when you look at something like this and you look at these reports of the last 6-7 years, this sucks, bro. Like, it genuinely feels like you're being dealt this hand that's like, we just have to make the best of it. And obviously the Niners have done that and they went to the Super Bowl. Obviously that 2019 when they went to the Super Bowl, they were the 6th most injured. They found a way to get there even with Jimmy Garoppolo. 2023, you had almost the least amount of injuries and you made it all the way. But then on the biggest stage, one of your star linebackers tears his freaking Achilles.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so it's like, even in 2023, you can almost associate that Super Bowl with injuries. It's just been tough, bro. Like, again, I hate to use it as an excuse, but it has really hindered the Niners' ability to, do exactly what they want to do from a year-to-year basis. And that, to me, is drawing questions. Like, are the Niners, do they not have a good training, training group? Do they not do enough, health stuff or health related stuff? Are they not warming their guys up properly? Like, what kind of activities are they doing? Or is their nutrition up? Like, I'm drawing all these questions now, like of what the preparation into these players preseason and during the season looks like to make sure they're in football shape on a game-to-game basis, even just a practice-to-practice basis at this point. And I'm not finding answers. So it's been frustrating, bro. And I hate to end it on that note, but like with the Jacob Cowing shit today, I'm just like, man, this is just another, it's just another season for the 49ers right now.
Right. Par of the course. And you make a great point. I mean, the year that in 2023, when they were the 2nd most healthiest team, that is important. And when you got, when we look at the Eagles, that was a huge reason for their success back in 22. We had all 22 of our starters. And last year we had 21 of our 22 starters playing the Super Bowl. So it's like when you're healthy, that's a huge part of success. And we watched that with like the Lions last year too. Like everything fell apart for them once their whole defense went down. So it's like you run into those issues throughout the course of a season. And it's easy to say like, oh, a training staff and stuff like that, but it is so fluky and it is so, there's no real like true science to say, oh, if you went 2 miles an hour slower, like you would have prevented this injury, like stuff like that. It's just that's what football is, right? And it's just really disappointing. It must be. I can't speak from experience right now, but it must be disappointing to know that like you go into the season, most of these guys can get fresh. And like I was seeing articles from the Miami Dolphins today, and two dudes went down with major
Yeah.
injuries too on the first day. And I'm like, you coming in here, it's the first day, all the vibes are great, and then you're hurt, and your whole season's over. And then it's like these are key important players, and now you're scrambling and figuring things out. And it's just like for the Niners, and for Niners fans, I feel for you. This must be, it's just like it's like a mixture of like annoying, frustrating, hopeless. Like it's just all this nonsense that you can't control. You literally can't do anything about it.
And
So it
not
sucks.
surprising too. That's the worst one.
Yeah, you've lived through it. It's been a defining trait of these San Francisco 49ers. And then when you go into the context of like the Kyle Shanahan discussion, right? Like how much of the inconsistencies in his resume here in San Francisco were him versus him, playing with third stringers or having third stringers as his guys for the majority of his season. So it is definitely an interesting conversation.
Exactly. So that wraps up the Niners training camp day one, and kind of the things I'm looking for the most. But ultimately, man, I'm excited for the season. Like I said, I do believe wholeheartedly that the Niners will be signing Jauan Jennings at some point in the very near future. Like I said, he's every part of what the 49ers want to continue to build upon in that organization. And that to me, just seeing him out there on the practice field, going about his normal training camp routine like you're not in the middle of a contract negotiation is just all the more reason to get this thing done and really solidify him as a 49er. So that's what I'm looking for now. Is the next step is signing Jauan Jennings.
Absolutely. And when that happens, we will report it as soon as we get back, in here to talk about it. And we'll let you guys know. Ben will give his take on it as soon as it happens, because it's going to happen. We're bringing, speaking it into existence. It's going to be great. And the vibes will continue for the off seasons of the San Francisco 49ers. So we will pivot on here to the Philadelphia Eagles. And, a couple, before we get into the training camp of it all, there was an event that happened just a couple days ago. The Eagles ended up getting their Super Bowl rings, and they had the ring ceremony. They threw a little shindig for the players, and it was like this whole event, very well received. And I'm going to throw up now a picture of what this beautiful, insane ring looks like. So it's right up here for you guys to see. And I wanted to just take a second here to just talk about some of the features on this ring and some of the little details that they put into it, because it's really cool when you hear about it, when you read about it, kind of just how things go down. So this is from an article from Dave Spadaro. He's a beat writer for the Eagles, and he writes for Sports Illustrated. And he was at the event, and he talked about he had all the details on there. So I'm reading just an excerpt from the article here that he has. For some of the little details that are on this ring. So let's start here. So encircling the top of the ring are 18 green stones, honoring the Eagles' NFL record tying 18 combined victories in the regular season and playoffs. And then on the side of the ring, the Super Bowl LAX logo is centered between the Eagles word mark and the score 40-22 from the game. 10 points of diamonds in the Super Bowl logo signify the Eagles' franchise record 10-game winning streak in the regular season, which put the team on the historic run for the Lombardi Trophy. On the players' side of the rings, players' last names are featured with their jersey numbers crested on the diamonds against the backdrop of the Lincoln Financial Field. And then bordering each side of the rings, for those who saw it in the picture, are wings. And there's a button on the ring that opens up these wings. And there's a message inscripted on there, was the message that Nick Sirianni had for the team the whole year, which was, "You can't be great without the greatness of others," inscripted on the ring. So the guys can press a button, it will pop open the rings. It's the first ring of that nature of any kind that had a button of sorts to kind of open up. So that was really cool. They had a 0.9 carats of diamonds on the wing to represent the combined 6 sacks and 3 turnovers by the Eagles defense in the Super Bowl. They had 5 diamonds on the special feature button for the 5 players to underscore the 5 Eagles who scored in the Super Bowl. And then inside the ring, they have a stamp of the Brazilian flag for their season opener. And underneath the flag is another Nick Sirianni quote that says, "Tough, detailed, and together," which was part of the culture thing as well. And there's also a listing of all the scores of all 4 postseason games with a 145 stamp, which is the Eagles' record-breaking accomplishment of 145 points in the playoffs. So those are just some of the little details from the rings, and I thought that was really cool. And seeing the rings, the videos from the ceremony and stuff, it was fun. Seeing the guys, wear the rings, or if you're Jalen Hurts, just keeping it in the box, for whatever. And again, the vibes were really good, and the ceremony was fun. You had former players there. CJ Gardner-Johnson was there, and he's been in some Eagles drama lately, but he was there supporting the team. And man, I'm blanking on a couple of the guys that were there, but you got guys who moved on. Mekhi Becton, guys who had moved on to other teams. They were there and they were celebrating. It was a really good thing. Was there? What did you think of the rings when you saw it? Do you think it was cool? I know objectively speaking, I know it's not your team, but like just looking at it, what do you think of the rings?
I've moved on.
Were you Jalen Hurts? I was like, hold up.
Yeah, I practiced that one in front of the mirror. No, we were gaming when we saw the picture of that ring. You sent it to me, and dude, like, it's a pretty ring. Like, it's incredible, the kind of features, not just that they threw into this one. It's awesome to hear the kind of the lore of the season thrown into one ring, right? But all the different things that they do every single season for these rings, and they do very similar style things. The wings, to me, though, bro, that's wild.
Those
Like,
are hard, bro.
that's aura right there. When you pop out the wings and that looks eagle, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was cool. I think the ring is super pretty. Yeah, I can only imagine. I'll just leave it at that.
You know what? The Niners ring, when we get there in 2050, is going to be awesome. So, it'll be fine. But
what would it pop out, like an Achilles? No, stop. What are you
insane.
doing?
But no, I think so a little bit of backstory for the ring ceremony. It did get pushed back. It was originally supposed to happen in June, but did get pushed back to this past weekend. And I thought the timing of it couldn't have been better. And I think a lot of the players kind of agreed. There was sentiment around the reporters talking to the players at the ceremony. They were like, it's a couple of days before training camp. These guys are all of a sudden, they're like, oh yeah, like this ring looks sick. Like, let's go get another. It like sparked the motivation again for these guys, especially when, again, a few days before training camp, it almost gave these guys a chance to say, all right, let's reset. We're officially closing out 2024. Let's focus on next season. And I think there was one for AJ Brown talking to Saquon's like, dude, we got to get another one of these. So it's like when you hear those things from our guys, it's great. And Jalen Hurts was, talked about for not wearing the ring. And like Ben said, he practiced it in the mirror. They asked him, why didn't he wear the ring at the ceremony? He's like, oh, because I've already moved on. It's this season. We're here. It's time to move on to this season. And I was, I'm okay with whatever the guys do. I don't think one either way. Like, if a guy wants to wear the ring, those if you saw the rings on their fingers, it's an insanely huge ring, and I don't think that's something you're just walking around with, especially in the wonderful streets of Philadelphia. No, for those who live there and everything. I just think that, you'll see guys. I think like if we look at Eagles players, like I could imagine a guy like Brandon Graham, like wearing that ring all the time. Right. But Jalen doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would, who is that flashy with those kind of things. And I also think he's the kind of guy that wants to flex when his career's done and he has like 4 or 5 rings and then he can do the whole hand picture type thing. I think that would be the time when we'll see Jalen Hurts wearing the rings. But I think, from the ring ceremony, really cool.
Jerry Rice walks around Levi's flaunting his 3 rings all the time, baby. Like, that's the time to do it. But
it's true. And so that's the thing, right? So, good energy for them. And it really, like, that energy carried into training camp, right? So we have day 1 and it's not even the tone from all these guys. It's like people are asking them, how does it feel to be the defending champions? They're like, we don't even like that title. They're like, we're not defending anything. The new season started. We're trying to win a title this year. So they're really trying to focus the mindset on, we're not defending anything. We're just trying to win again. And I love that. You heard that from Jordan. You heard that from Jalen. Like, those are the guys that, like, the culture is being set. And that's why I think, the Eagles are in a really good position. So let's talk about these training camp battles that I'm excited for. But before we do a training camp battle, because this is a part of the battle, but this is more just news. First round pick for the Eagles, Jihaad Campbell. He was seen out on the practice field and he was a participant. Now, it was a limited participant, but this is great news because earlier in OTAs, Vic Fangio was very open and honest about his timeline for Jihaad. And he thought that, oh, we'll probably see him in August. And the fact that he's out here at the very end of July, practicing with the guys, getting reps, that's huge. That he's even slightly ahead of schedule, I think is huge. And to have him get reps alongside Zach Bond early, like these are the things that these are the reps that I was worried he was going to be missing, but he's not, and he's getting acclimated into the system. So I thought that was really good news. What do you think? Do you think, from your perspective, would this is good news, right? You would be pretty happy if that happened on your end, right?
It's huge, bro. Like you said, it's valuable reps, right? You don't want him to get his first reps in August. Like you want him to get those early reps in training camp when the pads are off, when you can learn the ins and outs, not just of what your team wants to do, but what it's like to be amongst your teammates, and kind of what the overall vibe from a practice, from practice to practice is going to feel like. Like obviously you're there when you're injured, right? But it's different when you're starting to participate, and those are invaluable, especially in your rookie season. So for him to be able to be healthy, be out there for training camp, and be able to really start to get acclimated to Philly football, it's massive.
Yeah, and listen, like this, especially if he comes back and continues to stay healthy and there's no setbacks, then the conversation really becomes, how did the Eagles do it? How did they pull it off? And, if everyone, the main concern going for Jihaad Campbell in this draft was his injury concerns. People, they let him fall to the Eagles because they were worried about his injuries, that he wouldn't be available. And the fact that he's available now is really, really good news. So I wanted to start with that because that was, that's going to be one of the most important things. But before we start on the defensive side, I wanted to start off with the only offensive camp battle that remains for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is on the right guard position that was held down by Mekhi Becton and Tyler Steen in spurts last year. Right now, it's Tyler Steen's job to lose for the third straight year, and he's lost the job twice before. The Eagles brought in Kenyon Green via trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson. They brought in a few vets. They drafted a few kids. Like, it'll be interesting to see if Tyler Steen will just hold it down. I think it's his job. He's always started training camp with it, but the problem is he'll get hurt. Then another guy steps in and looks awesome. So for him to avoid, the job getting swiped again, I think that he just needs to stay healthy. And he showed that he is plenty capable. We don't need some superstar at our right guard spot. We just need a capable player who can play alongside this stacked offensive line with them and be a contributor. That big play against the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game where Saquon broke off a huge run, Tyler Steen had a huge block on there that allowed Saquon to escape. So it's like Tyler Steen, he knows how to play in the system. But, I do think that those are one of the positions the Eagles will continue to seek an upgrade for. But this is that's definitely the only important training camp battle because everywhere else on the Philadelphia Eagles offense is set in stone. So
even the quarterback,
the quarterback, man. I know Tanner McKee, man. He's looking nice. He's gonna have good preseason numbers. If you guys, we can, you guys can call us for a trade. We'll take a second rounder for him, and we'll be good. So
I'm good with Mac.
Yeah, right. So it's like it'll be, I think on the offensive side, that really is what the Eagles are concerned about. Injury wise, you have guys like Cam Jurgens who had back issues at the end of the year. There's some limited guys out there, but for the most part, this Eagles team is healthy. No major injuries outside of Nakobe Dean. So for the offensive line, we just need to figure out who's that right guard, and we'll be good to go.
So that must be so nice, dude. To just have like one real position to worry about on one side of the football. Like that's the dream. And coming off a Super Bowl, like
exactly. And this is but the only issue is, and this is the issue for, the whole year, where we are a very top heavy team. We lost a lot of depth and we don't have a lot of proven commodities behind these guys. And that's the same thing goes for like the wide receiver battle, right? Like It's AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. But then what happens? We've seen multiple times now what happens if one or both of those guys go down. It's a completely different team. It's a completely different situation. Now, the first throw of camp was this epic throw that Jalen had, and Jahan Dotson made the sick one-handed catch over this guy who was guarding him. So I'm like, Jahan Dotson, if he can, if Jalen Hurts can start targeting him a little bit more, I think, the offense opens up a little bit more too, because Jalen only likes to target AJ and Devontae, and that's it. So, or Dallas. So it really, maybe next year we'll see, this year we'll see what happens with, the guys being together for end of the year. But when we switch over to the defensive side of the ball, this is where all the questions lie. There's a lot of, what ifs or projection for this Eagles defense. And I think when we talk about the training camp battles that matter the most, I think the most important one on the defensive side for me would probably be our safety battle. Who's going to be starting alongside Reed Blankenship? Will it be our second round pick who we recently signed, Andrew Makuba? Will it be Sidney Brown, who's been in the system before? Not in the system, but he's been on the team before. And then they have a couple other guys waiting in the wings, Tristan McCollum or Andre Sam, who could fight for some spots. That's going to be the main one to look out for. There was reps. Cooper DeJean took reps at safety today as well, and I don't think the sentiment with that is that he's not there to like take the safety spot, but there's going to be packages where Cooper does play safety if they feel comfortable with like a Mac McWilliams playing at the slot corner, things like that. Just to find creative ways to keep one of your best players on the field. So we have seen Cooper in some safety sets, but the main battle for me is, I want our rookie Drew Makuba to steal the show and win the job. And I do think it's his job to lose right now over Sidney Brown's, because Sidney's from a past defensive coordinator regime, and he's not exactly the type of defender that a Vic Fangio system calls for, right? So he is kind of at a bit of a learning, at a disadvantage there. So I do think that, and not to mention Vic Fangio was very much in the room when the Makuba pick was made. He definitely had an influence in the Makuba pick being made. So it's like, if that's kind of his guy, you're gonna definitely give it to him. So that'll be the first battle I'm looking for, is who's gonna start alongside Reed Blankenship at safety. When we talk about the other battles at the camp, I think this is weird because I want to say the linebacker spot, right? Because Nakobe Dean's, hurt, and it's really just Jihaad Campbell and Jeremiah Trotter. But I don't view that as much of a battle, right? I think Jeremiah Trotter's gonna, if Campbell isn't fully healthy and they don't want to, throw him in right away, then it'll be Trotter's spot for the first few weeks, which I'm totally okay with packages of Campbell until Campbell's ready to go. So it kind of feels like that spot's kind of already just locked down for Campbell for when he gets back, right? Mm-hmm. So then we go to the defensive line, and we have Jalen Carter. Great. Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt played extremely well in the playoffs, but for the majority of the year last year, this Eagles defensive line was not some menacing team that was getting all these sacks. They really just overperformed in the playoffs, and that allowed us to, succeed the way we did. So this year on the defensive front this Eagles team is going to be relying on Nolan Smith to take a huge jump and Jalix Hunt to take a huge jump. Do I believe that they can? Yes, I'm confident. I have faith in the guys. Jordan Mailata actually praised the heck out of Jalix Hunt today, and he said, Jalix Hunt, man, he's going to be special. Like he moves like Micah Parsons, he has moves like Micah where he can cut on a dime, things like that. And he's like, Jordan was like, very few players move like that. So if that really is the potential ceiling for Jalix Hunt, I mean, hey, like I'm all for it. Like that's great. I know he was one of the guys you had mentioned back when we did the mock draft for that. He was one of your guys too, so it was interesting. But he's turned out really well, so I hope for the best. But those are that training camp battle is going to be really important. That and who starts alongside Jalen Carter, right? Because Jalen Carter is a man of his own who is going to command double and triple teams. Like he makes life easier. But Jordan Davis hasn't, he played 30% of the snaps last year, and Jordan Davis is coming out looking real good. He's the skinniest he's ever been, like the most thin he's ever been. Now, I don't know what that means for his role, though, because he was brought in on this team to be like a run stuffer, take up space, eat up space type of guy. So I do wonder like what he's trying to do or what the Eagles are going to try and do with him. And obviously we have Ty Robinson, Moro Ojima, but Like, that's the thing. Unproven commodities next to Jalen Carter, but maybe, hey, Jalen Carter does enough. Whoever's next to him, just do what you got to do. But the problem is, if Jalen Carter goes down, then what? And that's the other thing the Eagles, might take for granted is Jalen Carter he played so many snaps last year. He was on the field all the time, every game throughout the entire season. So if for some reason he goes down, I have no clue what this Eagles defensive front is going to be able to do in terms of getting pressure.
Well, and that's a good point because, I'll use the Niners as an example. We saw now Nick Bosa and all the years he's been here, how hard it's been for him when the rest of the defensive line either isn't put together or healthy, and he's essentially the only guy out there. It's tough, man. And when he goes down, it's really disastrous. So yeah, it does kind of draw those questions. But it's what the benefit to the Eagles is right now is you're running back with a lot of the same guys as last year. And so schematically, you can still run a lot of what you've been doing. And one thing the Eagles did really well throughout last year was consistently hiding a lot of the weaknesses. And that's something that, whether new weaknesses or old weaknesses or whatever the case may be, it's something that Vic has done very well. And Vic is going to do it at a very high level. So that's something you can kind of rely on when it comes to, the defensive scheme, and from a game to game, who's available week to week and what it looks like. You can rely that, Vic Fangio is going to kind of figure out exactly what needs to be hidden and how to kind of do that.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to see it. Like, listen, we also got to, who's going to start opposite of Quinyon Mitchell on the corner spot too on the outside. I want it to be Keely Ringo. I hope that he wins that job. I think
Do you think he deserves it?
Yes, he looks like when he got drafted 2 years ago, he was the youngest player in this draft by far. He was 20 years old, which is really young for, a guy in his position too. So he needed time to mold, right? And I think that when you look at him like on tape and on the field, he looks the part. Like, he has great size, great length, and he has good athleticism. He can keep up. It's just a matter of him getting the reps and honing his skills. And I think when the conversation is, do we want Keely Ringo, the young guy, or Adoree Jackson, the veteran, who you all kind of already know what you're getting from him?
Mm-hmm.
You have Quinyon on one side and you have Cooper. If Keely, whoever starts alongside is going to get targeted, whether it's Adoree or Keely, they're going to get thrown at to start the year.
Yeah.
It's going to be crazy. Quinyon Mitchell was a rookie and they still decided not to throw his way whatsoever. And that's probably going to continue in year 2. So it'll be interesting to see who does it, and I just want them to run with the young guy. And I think Healy, it's his job to lose right now. He has been getting the starting reps, so I hope that stays that way. Because it would just be really cool. I think it would be the perfect mix of youth, and it'd be all over. We have 2 young starting corners on the outside and Cooper DeJean on the nickel. Like, that's as good as the team as you could ask for, in my opinion, if Ringo hits the way I expect him to. And he does have, amongst beat writers and stuff in Philadelphia, he has a fan base. He has people who believe that that he has what it takes to take that next jump. So it's just a matter of, and that's what Vic said. Vic was like, he just needs reps. So will he be giving him those reps will be the question. So that's the last battle to, talk about, because on the defensive side, there are questions, but there's enough talent to, I don't believe we're going to be the number 1 defense against this year. I think that's given the state of the team and all the, moving parts, it just feels unrealistic. Right. But if you can maintain a top 10, defense, we'll be sitting pretty.
I think you guys will be top 10 easily. I think, though, the Broncos right now, at least on paper, the Broncos probably have like the best looking defense, and it'll be interesting to see kind of schematically. But like, honestly, bro, like, even where it sits right now with some of the questions, I would plot you guys like top 5. And obviously, like, season needs to get underway and you got to kind of feel some of these out. But defensively, from schematic standpoint, from the pressure that you guys put on teams, not just from the front line, I'm talking about as a defense entirety. Like, it's hard to see this team fall outside, Philly football fall outside of the top 10 defensively right now.
Yeah, I guess, it would be interesting to see if the Eagles, if they do drop, how big is the drop off?
Mm-hmm.
And what are teams really going to try and do to attack this team? Are they going to, I feel like there's going to be, well, with the Eagles, winning the Super Bowl, you're going to have the target on your back, right? So you're going to get
Oh
every
yeah.
team's best shot. So there's going to be some pretty creative ways that they're going to attack this defense this year. And I am curious, and I don't mind, I don't mind a little bit of development from these young guys. There's going to be growing pains, miscommunications here and there for the first few weeks. And hopefully, I don't know what the preseason's going to look like, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because I know Sirianni is a very big proponent of not playing starters in preseason just to preserve and all that stuff. Um, and it can't fault him because it works. And but I wonder on the defensive side of the ball with a lot of these questionable young guys, if you're going to just see what they got, throw them out in the preseason, at least for one like full preseason game, and see if you can get information that way. But that's outside of that, the vibes are awesome. The team, the Eagles just seem so locked in right now, and it's definitely something that like you can tell that the winning has affected them in a positive way where they truly do feel like they can go back again. This isn't like a fluky thing and all, especially when you have the offense returning 10 out of the 11 starters. That's something that like you can carry that to a successful season if everyone just stays in the right mindset and focuses on, like Jalen says, keeping the main thing, right? So it is, I think, Jalen, Sirianni, those guys are so obsessed with winning that that allows the team to really get behind them. And again, you hear the sentiment being echoed from the other players not named Jalen or Nick Sirianni, and they're all voicing the same thing. So I think that's really important, and I think that like when we talk about the offseason for the Eagles, it's been a quiet one, like relative to the news around the Eagles and like decisions that they made, stuff like that. It's been a quiet offseason. No contract disputes. We signed, Zach Bond and Barkley. We kept, faces here. So like, there's no reason to believe why the Eagles can't just, pick up where they left off to start the season. I'm really excited for that. The mindset's there, the vibes are there. So I'm really excited for it.
Fire. You guys do your thing all season long, but understand, bro, like if y'all make it to the Super Bowl and y'all play in Levi's, I probably am not gonna watch that game. I'm probably not gonna be on this podcast anymore.
Oh my
Like,
God. Well, no
I don't think I
live
can handle
pod
that.
from Levi's? Come on,
Hell no.
crazy.
You
That's
go
true.
on.
That's true. I bet you wouldn't want to see it all green in there too. That'd be horrifying.
We'd still make it red, bro. Trust me.
Bad. I love that. But
Kansas
no,
City, baby.
oh, I'm dead. But no, yeah, that'll be interesting too, dude. It would be.
It'd be
I'm
wild.
gonna speak it into existence right now. The possibility of a Niners, the Eagles. You know what? I'm hoping the Niners go 15-2, take the 1 seed, so then the Eagles can play the championship game in
And then
Levi's.
stay in
That
Levi's for
would
the
be
next
pretty
2 weeks.
cool, right? For if whoever's in the NFC Championship game, they're
Yeah.
like, if they play in Levi's, they're like, hey, we're staying here. So that'd be pretty cool.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, if we could get an Eagles Niners, like a true conference title game, bro, that'd be nice. But I mean, you guys,
Don't get your hopes up.
yeah, you already got players dropping, so I guess it's not really
Yeah.
gonna happen.
It's a mess, bro. We'll talk about it soon.
For sure, especially when we get there. But so yeah, dog days of summer. Training camp is here. So training camp is here, but basketball's pretty much going to go quiet for preseason, especially on the Kings side of things. But if there's anything major that comes up, we'll let you know. We'll talk about it. It's not like we don't have time here in the off season. So on top of that, we got big changes coming. You can't really tell right now, but on my side over here, I've set up is a little bit different. Um, Ben and I are gonna unveil, a cool new setup and a cool new way to do the podcast here going into this in just a few weeks. Like we're in the works, guys. It's gonna be crazy, getting to put this all together and start year 3 off with a bang. So stay tuned for that. We're really excited for it.
I've got to say, man, like we spent, you and I spent some time over the weekend working on this a little bit more, and it was just, I was driving home and I was just giddy, bro. Like I was so excited. I'm looking so forward to showing you guys exactly what we got going on, because This is gonna take this podcast to another level, and we're gonna really be able to connect with you guys a little bit deeper.
Exactly. And we appreciate all you guys who stuck along for the ride. We notice, we love to pay attention. We're trying to grow each and every week, and we have actually seen, legitimate progress. And we're grateful for all of you guys who tune in each and every week and stick with us and, cry with us when our teams loses or laugh at us when our teams loses, things like that. But that's what we're here for. We want to build a community with you guys in the Behind the Back podcast and build something special. So we're definitely looking to take that next step here next year. So we're really excited.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, if this is your first time checking out the pod, welcome. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us. If you're interested, we are Eagles, Niners, Kings, but we definitely talk about the NBA and the NFL as a whole. We are going to, in just a few weeks, probably when we get everything set up, we'll do our predictions for the year in the NFC and the AFC, get our divisions, squared away, see who ends up with a better record. We got a lot of stuff planned. And we appreciated the reception we received on our quarterback clips, were our quarterback grades. We've seen some comments asking to do some other quarterbacks, so we will definitely have some clips out with our grades for other quarterbacks. We hear you guys and we appreciate the feedback. These are the things that we're looking for. We want to give the people what they want. So we'll definitely get some more rankings out here soon. So please stay tuned for that. But I think that's enough for this episode. So with that being said, this was episode 97 of the Behind the Back Pod. Guys, we're almost at 100. It's going to be crazy. So you can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. For all y'all watching on YouTube or any videos up here, we got the links to our social up above. For all you audio listeners, the links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow the show, leave a comment. If, for Niners fans, if you're excited for training camp, Eagles fans excited for training camp, Kings fans, if you're a little less depressed after summer league or more depressed, whatever, let us know, vent to us, let us know what you guys are feeling, what you're excited for. So we appreciate you guys so much. I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here as always is
Ben the Jet Rats.
All right, y'all. We love you. We will talk to you next week. Peace.